The panelist that we have now is Ronnie Lunn from Saint Benedict Church. He's been active and he has considerable experience, may take a different perspective, and the panel allows for multiple perspectives that will enrich the debate. I have great opportunity on inviting our second panelist.
Normally when I speak, I don't speak from a podium, so I feel tethered. I'm stuck here. We're going to see how this goes. So in North American and European culture, faith is relegated simply to an ideology. Something in our head. We kind of, lump it alongside philosophy. It's like a hat. You can take it off and put it back on is kind of our Western understanding of religion. The world would say that faith's an external thing. It's really no different than Leafs or Habs, Tim's or Starbucks, Donald or Hillary. Might even be more important. Those things might be more important than religion. But I think all of us in this room know that it's much deeper than that. It's an ontological reality. It really is based in the foundations of who we are. No more removable from me than my head is. And when we dialogue with the world, they really have no basis to move from this in. This is really our struggle. It's a struggle that I see when I dialogue with teenagers about religion, teenagers who are even more entrenched in our materialistic culture than even I am, and I'm not that old, even though I'm bald and I have gray whiskers. I'm not that old yet, but the teens that I work with are so entrenched in the materialistic culture, a culture of moral relativism at best. Really, we can just look at our legalistic understanding of religion. So in our society, if I were to physically assault you, I'm probably going to go to jail, maybe a fine at the least. But I'm free to stand up here and say the worst, most vile things about your religion that I want to say. Now, I know for a lot of us, we might actually choose to take that physical assault over allowing somebody to say those terrible things about our faith. But our world doesn't understand that really those words cause more violence to us than does the physical assault. And a lot of us come from faith traditions that have a long line of martyrs that bear witness to this. So how do we dialogue in this society? Well, I'm not really sure, so good talk. I don't really have very many answers, but what I can do is speak a bit about my experiences, positive and negative events, to highlight the importance of healthy religious dialogue. So just a note, in any of these stories that I share with you, I have changed the names for the anonymity of the people involved. When I was teaching in public school, there was a young Christian man who was a student of mine, Joseph. Joseph was a popular kid, athletic, good-looking, not a lot that people could make fun of him for, except that he was deeply and profoundly Catholic, and very outspoken about it. There were a few boys in his class that enjoyed making fun of him for this purpose. But it went beyond joking. Their words were intended to hurt. They told him how backwards he was, criticized him for mistruths that they had, how his beliefs were superstitious and outdated. Teachers said nothing about this when it took place in class. He came to me, asked for my help. I recommended that he talk to the administration. He thought this was a great idea, but not to get the boys in trouble, but to offer an idea that their class could have a forum of open dialogue so that he could express his beliefs, others could express theirs, and maybe there could be some type of mutual understanding to end these boys making fun of him. He really wanted a place where everyone was free to voice their opinion without malice, to have healthy debate. Well, Joseph was taught a valuable lesson by the administration of the school, that religion had no place in the classroom, and it shouldn't be talked about because people could be offended and complain. So the teasing continued. One day, Joseph clocked the worst of the offenders. He was suspended from school. His parents would have preferred that he dealt with the situation in a different way, but really, he had exhausted every option that he could think of. And that was all he was left with, and he said that he couldn't take the abuse anymore. What the administration and teachers failed to realize, beyond the offenses against Joseph's ontology, was that open religious dialogue doesn't tend to offend. Indeed, in a culture of trigger warnings and safe spaces, we've lost the art of debate. During my education degree, I became friends with a fellow student named Amira, a beautiful Muslim lady who I enjoyed talking with because we shared similar values. One day, while sitting around having lunch, her and I began to talk to one another about our faiths. We proceeded to criticize each other's beliefs. I would state what I believed. She'd say she agreed with A and B, but disagreed with C. I would similarly respond, telling her the points that I disagreed with and what I agreed with. We finished our conversation, finished eating. She left the room to prepare for class. When she left, my peers who had been present looked at me aghast. How could I tell her that she was wrong on certain things? In fact, I shouldn't be debating religion at all. What they couldn't understand was that both Amira and myself were rooted in our ontology. Neither one of us felt threatened or insulted by the other. There was never a raised voice, never a hurt feeling. That conversation, and others like it, brought us to a deeper understanding of one another, a greater mutual respect. Why would I ever respect Amira if she ceded her position? Why would she respect me if I did likewise? If either of us did that, we'd damage others' views of not just ourselves, but of our faith. We both understood and respected our positions. An even more fragile topic in our society, if there's one thing that our society in Canada understands as an ontological reality of who we are, it's our sexuality. And we begin talking to our kids about it from the time they enter school. I have kids who are just starting school age now, and they've begun to talk about these things as early as primary. I was told during my education degree by a professor in class that no matter our beliefs, no matter what our religion taught us, as teachers, it was our job in the public school system to teach that same-sex marriage was absolutely, positively a great thing, and no dissenting voices mattered. I raised my hand. I shared with the professor that I didn't share that same statement on marriage. I shared that I'm not someone who supports same-sex marriage, that I thought it was actually my job as a teacher to create an environment where all voices on the issue could be heard, so long as they were free of hatred. I believed it was more valuable to have debate, to allow people to understand one another and respect one another, not to simply teach what was in vogue at the time, but to encourage critical thinking. While I shared this, a peer, who I respected and valued greatly, was sitting behind me, a young woman in a committed, long-term relationship with another young woman. I was sitting at the front of the class, and in my head, I was imagining the expressions on all of my classmates' faces as I made these statements. I think I rightly imagined them. I felt this would be the moment that I would lose many of my friends. When class ended, I turned to this particular young woman, and I told her that I deeply hoped I didn't offend her in any way. But I couldn't sit there and be told to say something that I didn't believe, to go against my conscience. To my surprise, she smiled, told me that she wasn't offended. Although we had opposing views on the definition of marriage, she said she had never felt judged by me, knew that I bore her no hatred at all, and had always shown her respect and understanding. Did I ever breathe a sigh of relief? See, society understands our sexual preference as being part of our ontological values, and so if we could have this sensitive of a conversation, surely there was room for religious dialogue in the classroom. When we avoid these controversial topics in the name of tolerance, we actually breed intolerance. Ignorance of religion is damaging not just to individuals of our society, but to the entire world. I taught for a couple years at Sacred Heart Senior High, private Catholic school. The students who attend this school, however, are of many different faiths: Islam, Judaism, Baha'i, Sikh, many Christian denominations, practicing, non-practicing, even some atheist families simply pursuing a good education for their children. All the students of the school go to a Catholic Mass a couple times a year. They talk about the church in their classroom. They're taught by many teachers who are Catholic. So isn't it funny then that in my time there, none of these girls ever expressed offense? They never had their religion threatened in any way. If anything, in a school where religious dialogue was encouraged and is encouraged, The girls grew deeper in their various faiths, rather than being drawn away from them. I learned more about other religions as a teacher there than I learned from an entire undergraduate studying religions. And the girls expressed understanding and respect of each other's beliefs. This is a lesson our education system needs to learn. From there, I went into the public sphere, and early on in my substituting days, I sat having lunch in a teacher lounge of a school that I was at for the very first time. I'll censor this part of the story, but I want you to imagine the effect of these words. Teacher walked in, began telling a story in a very angry tone. She talked about a boy in her class who was homosexual, and the two boys who were Catholic who kept picking on him. She said that if we wanted to combat homophobia, it was our job as teachers to tell parents to stop raising their children as Christians. She used a very choice expletive when describing Christians. I sat stunned. First of all, these boys' homophobia had nothing to do with the church. Secondly, their intolerance is actually against church teaching. And I'm ashamed in that moment that I didn't say anything. The rage this teacher had was so overwhelming, and nobody said anything. In fact, a few other teachers nodded and laughed in agreement. That's the school system that I encountered, not just lacking understanding of religions, but completely hostile towards them. But I don't blame her or any other teacher, because in my education degree, I was taught to deny my religion and speak against its teachings, to not encourage other voices to be heard other than what's currently socially acceptable, to simply remove my faith hat and leave it at the door. So what would it look like if we had spaces of healthy, respectful dialogue of religions? Instead of painting all Muslims with the ISIS brush, all Christians with the Westboro brush, all Jews with a Zionist brush, we brought people to an understanding of one another. I had a taste of it during my time at Sacred Heart, but that's a very exclusive environment. I saw the opposite in the environment that every other Canadian citizen is being formed and educated in. As I said at the beginning, I don't have a lot of answers. We're battling a culture that doesn't understand the depths of our faith. We're battling a culture that has flipped the understanding of separation of church and state to mean something very different than was originally intended. I speak to high school students from across the province, both in school and church environments. And the one common thread that I hear repeated over and over by every teenager is about how they feel that they have to hide the most important part of who they are for fear of persecution, or a belief that they're not allowed to voice their opinion in the name of tolerance. But this is quite clearly formed from an intolerance. One of my Christian groups taking place in a high school, we even had a young Muslim man attend one year. The reason why he attended? He felt more accepted for his beliefs in that group than he did throughout the school for the entire day. He had an environment, even though it was one from a different religion, where he could voice his beliefs, receive understanding, where he could fully be himself. It also allowed the Christian teenagers to learn lots about Islam, bringing them to a deeper understanding of their Muslim peers and the world in general. In an increasingly pluralistic society, Nova Scotian population bolstered by newcomers and refugees of various faiths, a world racked by intolerance of religions, not just by the non-faithful as here in Canada, but by the faithful themselves, it is essential that we create these spaces of dialogue. My heart burns for this, and I hope yours does too. Only together, all of us from various minorities within our communities, can we be loud enough to be heard. The old saying, "Together we stand, divided we fall," is cliché, but apt. We all get it. To use my Christian reference, I think I'm preaching to the choir. But I think we should ask ourselves, how can we begin this change in our places of worship, if anything? And as my peer, Dr. Hussein, said, it goes beyond tolerance. I don't think that we tolerate people who we love. It goes far beyond that to an understanding of the person in front of us. I know in my heart that we can create places that draw youth into the doors and give them a space to debate, to question, to challenge, to learn, and to grow. We're all brethren in some way. Jews are my cousins, Muslims are my brothers and sisters. As a family, we must sit at the same table and will the good. Every Sunday at Mass, we pray, "Glory to God in the highest, and peace to people of goodwill." So every Sunday, And every time that I go to Mass, I'm praying that we will all one day sit at the same table, will the good. I can't wait to celebrate the fruit of our labors. Thank you.
I had mentioned to you that the approach will be multiple, different in perspective, one a little more anecdotal, one research-based, one. And the key to open the door is still to come, which is tools for empowerment of youth for social change. And this means, to some extent, that we have to be somewhat pragmatic in our approach and ask the fundamental question whether the locus of control is internal or external, the power to change. We expect our leader to give us information, influence, status, mentoring, goal setting, and all sorts of tools to empower us. But to empower us now for social change, the youth, I think this will have to be developed some more. So I call on our last speaker, Mr. Khan, to give us his perspective on the concluding note. After that, we'll now open it to panel discussion. We'll open it to the floor, and then we'll get our convener to come and assess the day and the day for tomorrow to tell us what to expect tomorrow. Thank you very much.